Hey everybody, Ryan here at etrailer. Today on our 2013 Ford Explorer, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the Roadmaster base plate kit with removable arms. So before we get too carried away talking about the base plate, I figured it'd be beneficial just to kind of refresh ourselves and touch base on the main components that we're going to need to flat tow our Ford down the road in the first place. The main components are going to consist of 5 different things. So first one being your base plate, and what that's going to do is provide us with a solid and reliable attachment point. That way we can hook our tow bar up. Tow bar is going to be the second component, and this is going to be the physical link that actually connects the front of your SUV to the back of your motorhome. Third main component is going to be safety cables, and these are pretty straightforward. These are there in the event of an unlikely disconnect. These are going to keep everything connected together. The fourth main component will be tow bar wiring, and what this is going to do is transfer the lighting functions from the back of your coach to the back of your Ford, keeping you safe and legal. And last but not least, the fifth main component will be a supplemental braking system, and what this is going to do is apply the brakes in your Explorer whenever you hit the brakes in your motorhome, helping to bring you to a more complete and predictable stop. So this is what the front of your Ford's going to look like whenever you're not flat towing and you're just driving around like you normally would. I mean, you can definitely see everything, but it doesn't look terrible by any means. Doesn't really look like it's out of place. And honestly, when it comes down to it, I mean, when you're putting, you know, a bunch of components on the front of your vehicle, you're going to notice them a little bit, right? So I think it does okay blending in for sure. Definitely going to be easy to use. With that said, I do wish they would include a couple of brackets, or at least one. That way you can mount up your other flat towing components a little bit easier. Not really a huge deal. You can always grab some no drill brackets right here at etrailer, which I definitely suggest doing. That's what I did, and worked out pretty good. But yeah, so this is how it's going to look. Whenever you're ready to use it, it's going to be simple, and I feel like that's really important. You know, you don't want something that's super complicated by any means. And it uses these removable arms. And so the way these are going to work is you can just put them into the base plate and pin them down. So if you notice the orientation of the removable arm, you have this tab down here on the base plate, tab on your arm. You obviously want them to line up. So you slide it in like so. Take your pin, put that through, and then your clip. Not a ton of space to work, but I mean, it's definitely manageable. And for the other side, just do the same exact thing there. So once you have the removable arms installed in your base plate, you can pull up to your motorhome and get the tow bar and everything else hooked up. So your tow bar is just going to line up. Those arms, you take your pins, put them through, and then that hole in the pin, you want to line up with that hole there in the arm. Drop that through. That's really all there is to it there. Obviously the other arm be the same way. Take your safety cable ends, push those through, and then obviously hook up your other components, you know, plug everything in, and that's really all there is to it. Roadmaster tow bars are going to work, the majority of them at least, are going to work with the base plate. If you happen to have another brand of tow bar, it's not really a huge deal. Chances are really good that there's an adapter available that you can switch out the ends and allow you to pair up that different tow bar with this Roadmaster base plate. I think it looks pretty clean actually. Everything's easy to see. It looks relatively organized, and you know, that's a big deal. If you come back here, take a quick peek at everything, you can see it's intact. Everything looks right in the way it should. So I can't really ask for too much more, you know, out of a base plate. Got to give you that good attachment point that you can rely on, and it's going to look pretty good too. So not really a whole lot more to it. As far as the installation goes, honestly, I was pretty surprised, pleasantly surprised rather. on how easy it went on. You do have to remove the front fascia. You know, it might sound intimidating, but it's actually pretty straightforward, not a ton of fasteners or anything super hard to get to. Once that was out of the way, everything bolted up pretty good. There's 2 holes you're gonna have to enlarge just a little bit, so, I mean, not the end of the world. And essentially the base plate will just kind of bolt right up. So definitely doable. Really shouldn't give you a whole lot of issues. But speaking of that, why don't we go ahead and pull into the garage and put it on together now. To begin our installation, we're gonna be here at the front of our Explorer, and we're gonna be working to get our fascia removed. That way we have the space that we need to get our base plate and everything on. So you're gonna pop the hood, and we're gonna have some fasteners along this top edge here that we need to do first. First one's being 2 push pins located right here. So here's one of the push pins. With these, you can take a flathead screwdriver, pry up on the head of it, and then pull the base out. I'll do the same deal for this one right here. The head comes out, not a big deal. Grab that and pull it out. You can always just push the head back in. And then, if you look along this whole edge, we're gonna have a total of 7 10mm head screws. Go ahead and work along and get all these removed. Now if we move to our wheel well edge, we're gonna have 4 fasteners along the edge of it. In our case, these are 5.5mm head screws. Yours might be a Phillips head screw. Kind of just depends on your model. But we'll grab our socket, get all these out. If you need to, you can always kind of turn your tire in one way or the other. Might give you some extra space. Once some are out of the way though, you can grab this piece of trim, kind of just pull it off up to about there. And that's going to expose another bolt there. And then one more right here. So get them out, and I'm simply just going to repeat the same process over on the other side. As a matter of fact, anything we do to one side of the vehicle, we're also going to do to the other side because it'll be set up the same way. Now if we move underneath our vehicle along this edge, on each side, you're going to have these little panel deals. Those are going to have 3 fasteners in them, and I'm going to use an 8mm to pull those out. But you kind of free that up, and then in the middle, we're going to have 3 more 8mm. So one there, which is missing on ours, but yours will probably be there. One in the middle and one there too. Go ahead and get all those out as well. So while we're under here, you kind of take your panel and pull that out of the way. That'll expose a connector here for our fog light if your vehicle has them. Might as well unplug them since we're right here. We're going to do this connector, push down on that center tab, and simply just separate it. So at this point, I think we're ready to get our fascia removed. I did put some tape, painter's tape along the seams and everything where we're going to be working here. That way we don't accidentally scratch anything. And this little plastic cover here that we undid earlier, just going to get that out of the way too. That way it's not falling on top of us. But with that said, I'm going to grab a friend and we'll get this off. So what you want to do is start on the corner and grab your fascia and just start to unpop it and work your way around. And this is actually coming off pretty easy. Got to carefully pull out on it. We may have some wiring, you need to disconnect. In our case, we actually don't, but pay attention to that when you're doing yours. You might have another connector or something you need to disconnect, but with this free, we'll go ahead and set it off to the side somewhere safe. With our fascia out of the way, we can get this ambient air temperature sensor out of the way as well. This, you can just take a trim tool or a screwdriver, whatever you got, just kind of pry behind it to get it popped off this piece of plastic, and we'll just kind of let it hang out of the way for now. So if you look at your bumper beam, you're going to have 4 holes in it, right? 2 holes on each side. The very outside holes are going to be just a little too small to get our hardware through. So one of your bolts is just too big to go through there. So we need to enlarge this a little bit. I'm going to use a die grinder bit like this to make it just a little bit bigger to get this bolt through there. You could probably use a drill bit too, or a step bit, or whatever you got. Just be careful, you know, if you got a super long bit, you don't want to puncture it and hit your radiator or anything like that. So just keep that in mind. But I'm going to enlarge this one, and then obviously the one on the other side of our vehicle, just big enough to get our bolt through. Something that I do want to touch base on real quick. Some of you at home, your Explorer might have what's called adaptive cruise control. And if you do, it looks like there will be a black box located somewhere over here on the driver's side, kind of connected to your bumper beam, and there will be some brackets kind of holding it up. If you have that, refer to your instructions. You're going to have to cut a little piece of that bracket off to clear everything. And just pay attention to what the instructions tell you. In our case, we don't have that, so obviously we don't need to worry about it, but it's something that I did at least want to mention. So now you can take our base plate and get this in place. The way this is going to work, these back pieces are going to kind of go behind your bumper beam. Front piece is obviously in front of it. It's going to kind of hug the bumper beam. And those holes are going to line up. And then for the time being, these two here in the middle, you're just going to take your 3.5-inch bolt and this spacer, 1.25 inch wide spacer. We're just going to put these through, and those will at least kind of give the base plate something to hang on so it don't fall off while we're working on the rest of the bolts. So this bolt here that we put in, we're going to put the finishing hardware on it so you can see here's where that end of the bolt comes out through our base plate. All the hardware that we're going to use to secure the base plate, you want to use some of this red Loctite on the threads, and you can find it here at eTrailer if you don't have any. But then you're going to take a split lock washer, slide that over, and a hex nut, and we're going to get all this hardware started hand tight for now. So now moving to this hole, you're going to take, this is a 2.5-inch bolt, put on your Loctite, and you're going to take this thicker pipe spacer. This is going to kind of go in between the base plate and your bumper beam there, and you're going to push that bolt through. Now this is going to be really, really hard to see behind here, but pretty self-explanatory. This bolt is going to pass through the backside of the bumper beam, and it's going to kind of sit in an indention like this, right? So imagine if this indention was just on the back side. What you're going to do is take the 1-inch spacer plate where the end of the bolts come in, slide that on, and then split lock washer and hex nut. So make sure it goes through your tube spacer there, push it through, and we'll take the hardware we talked about and get that in place. Moving on to the side here, where the base plate comes in contact with their frame, you're going to take this angle bracket, the side that has 2 holes in it, it's going to face like that, and you're going to take 4-inch bolt, put on your Loctite, put it through there, through the hole in the frame. It's going to drop down through, but there's going to be a void there. All right, so we're gonna take the smaller pipe spacer, sneak that in there, like so. I'm gonna finish that off with a split lock washer and a hex nut. And then the 2 holes that we talked about in here are gonna line up with 2 holes in the base plate. You're gonna take these bolts, push them right on through. If I'm coming through, just like all the other hardware, split lock washer, and a hex nut. So once all of your hardware is in place and tight, come back and snug it down using 19mm socket and wrench. You can also use a 3/4, whatever you have at your disposal there. So once everything is snug, you need to make sure and come back and torque everything down to the amount specified in the instructions. If you don't have a torque wrench, you can always get one here at eTrailer, or a lot of times, if you go to your local auto parts store, they'll have one there available that you can rent. So what you can do now, that ambient air temperature sensor that we disconnected a little while ago, you can take that, just put it on this gusset or this angled piece of your base plate here, and just take a zip tie and secure it to it, and that'll wrap up our ambient air sensor. So at this point, it'd be a great opportunity to install some of your other flat towing components, like your braking system and your wiring and things of that nature. And that's because obviously with the front end all taken apart, we have a lot more room to work. It's a little bit easier on us. If you're not going to be installing those components, or already have them in place, you would reinstall your fascia the opposite way that you removed it. You are probably going to have to trim out a small opening to allow access to your base plate, which there are some diagrams in the instructions that you can reference. But with that said, what I'm going to do is get everything else in terms of our other flat tow components installed, and then we'll come back and do the fascia, get that cut and put back on. So I followed the diagram and the instructions, and we'll cut this little area out. And then obviously we're going to have to cut out a couple more marks for our wiring connector and our breakaway switch to pass through, but I found it to be the most accurate if we at least get started with these openings, and we can kind of hold it up and check things out and mark where we need to cut for our other components. So pretty thin plastic. You can use a pair of snips, a Dremel tool. I'm using a little saw like this one here. Whatever you got, whatever worked best for you, will work just fine. So once you have your fascia trimmed out, you have your friend help you put it back on. Makes it a little bit easier. And I got it loosely in place here, and it actually looks like it fit pretty good. Like I said, what I did before, I cut these openings out, held it up, and then marked where I needed to cut for our other stuff, because everyone's setup's going to be a little bit different. Really not a guideline to follow there. So that's what I suggest doing. That's what I did. Turned out pretty good. Everything fits. So now we'll just simply resecure our fascia the opposite way that we removed it. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Roadmaster baseplate kit with removable arms on our 2013 Ford Explorer.